Winston Churchill's 5 children lived in the long shadow of a man whose presence shaped the 20th century. Churchill himself remains one of the most documented figures of modern history, remembered as Britain's Prime Minister during the Second World War, a Nobel Prize-winning author, and the commanding orator who rallied a nation in its darkest hour. The attention that followed his career naturally extended to his family. Newspapers, biographers, and later television programs chronicled not only his political battles, but also the private struggles and public achievements of his descendants. Each of his children carried the burden of being associated with one of the most famous men of their century, with their lives repeatedly revisited through archives, memoirs, and public records. Churchill's public image as a statesman was accompanied by a more complicated family story. He and his wife Clementine Churchill, whom he married in September 1908, had 5 children over a period of 13 years. Their lives unfolded in an environment shaped by privilege, politics, and scrutiny. 3 of them, Randolph, Sarah, and Mary, would live into adulthood with notable public profiles. Diana and Marigold, the other 2 daughters, experienced lives cut short by tragedy, one through illness as a child and the other through personal struggles as an adult. The confirmed fact anchoring this opening is simple and undisputed. Winston and Clementine Churchill had exactly 5 children. Their names were Diana, 1909, 1963, Randolph, 1911, 1968, Sarah, 1914, 1982, Marigold, 1918, 1921, and Mary, 1922, 2014. This family roster appears consistently in Churchill biographies, official genealogies, and public records. It is a foundation upon which the narrative of their later lives is built. One overlooked detail about their upbringing lies in the reality of Churchill's political and social schedule. Winston Churchill was often absent from his children's formative years due to political campaigns, military service, and his literary work. Clementine carried the main burden of raising them, often relying on governesses and family friends during periods when she accompanied her husband abroad. Letters preserved in the Churchill archives reveal Clementine's deep anxieties over the well-being of her children, particularly during the wartime years when their safety was far from guaranteed. These personal concerns, largely hidden from public view during Churchill's lifetime, became better known only after private correspondence was published decades later. A debated point among historians is the extent to which Churchill's fame and temperament influenced his children's difficulties in later life. Some biographers, such as Martin Gilbert, emphasize Clementine's stabilizing role and argue that Churchill was affectionate and supportive when present. Others point to testimonies from family members describing him as distant, absorbed in his own career, and prone to outbursts that left lasting marks on his children. The disagreement reflects the challenge of separating memory from record and of reconciling the public myth of Churchill with the intimate reality of his household. This tension between legacy and private consequence frames the story of his 5 children. Their lives, in many respects, serve as footnotes to the grand narrative of their father, but they also contain stories of independence, loss, ambition, and resilience. The burden of history never left them, and for some, it proved overwhelming. Moving forward, the focus turns to the family as a whole, outlining the paths of each child before diving into their individual stories. The Churchill family tree stands as both a record of private lineage and a matter of public curiosity. Winston and Clementine Churchill's 5 children were born across 13 years, each at different moments in their father's rising career. Diana was the first, arriving on 11th July 1909. Randolph followed on 28th May 1911, and then Sarah, born on 7th October 1914, as Europe plunged into the First World War. The 4th, Marigold, was born on 15th November 1918, only days after the armistice that ended the conflict. The youngest, Mary, was born on 15th September 1922, at a point when Churchill's political fortunes were fluctuating, but his public visibility remained constant. The family's place of residence changed according to Winston's career and finances, but key addresses became part of their legacy. The Chartwell estate in Kent, purchased in 1922, served as the family home for decades. It provided a base where the children grew up, entertained friends, and, in some cases, returned later in life. The household was one of privilege, but also of discipline, with Clementine managing much of the domestic order, while Winston immersed himself in writing and politics. The confirmed fact central to this section is that all 5 children were raised during a period of major upheaval in Britain. The 2 world wars, the decline of the empire, and the shifting political landscape of the 20th century. Their lifespans and life choices mirrored these broader changes. Randolph, for example, would try to emulate his father in politics, while Sarah and Mary pursued careers tied to the arts and public service, reflecting post-war transformations in British society. A lesser-known detail is that Marigold, the 4th child, did not survive beyond infancy. She died of septicemia on 23 August 1921, just before her 3rd birthday. The loss deeply affected Clementine, who was advised by doctors to travel abroad to recover from the shock. Family records indicate that her trip to the south of France during this period left Winston temporarily responsible for the surviving children. Marigold's short life is often overshadowed in biographies of her father, but remains a critical part of the Churchill family's emotional history. Debate continues among historians and family commentators over the role Chartwell played in the children's upbringing. Some accounts portray it as a place of freedom, where the Churchill children enjoyed country life, pets, and expansive gardens. Others stress that the financial strain of maintaining Chartwell, combined with Winston's demanding career, created an unstable environment. Clementine, while devoted, was frequently under pressure, leading to an atmosphere that could swing from idyllic to tense. This debate highlights the broader issue of privilege versus pressure in aristocratic households of the era. As a group, the 5 siblings displayed widely differing personalities. Diana was often described as sensitive and fragile, while Randolph carried his father's charisma and volatility. Sarah sought independence through acting, and Mary, the youngest, became the most stable and longest-lived of them all. Marigold's brief life serves as a reminder of the fragility even within a household of influence and wealth. Together, they embody a family story that was anything but uniform. From here, attention turns to the eldest son, Randolph Churchill, whose life mirrored his father's ambitions, but carried a very different outcome. Randolph Churchill, the only son of Winston and Clementine, was born on 28 May 1911 at 33 Eccleston Square in London. From the beginning, his position carried weight. He was the heir not only to a prominent family name, but also to the towering reputation of his father. Educated at Sandroyd School, Eton College, and later at Christ Church, Oxford, Randolph lived in environments designed to cultivate leadership. His intelligence and wit were evident, but so too were traits of volatility and restlessness that would follow him throughout his life. The confirmed fact in his story is that Randolph attempted a political career that closely paralleled his father's path, though without comparable success. He first entered Parliament in 1940 as the Conservative Member of Parliament for Preston during a wartime by-election. His tenure was short-lived. He lost the seat in the 1945 general election when Labour's landslide swept through Britain. He attempted multiple comebacks, but never secured another parliamentary seat, despite contesting Wavertree in 1950 and other constituencies in later years. The record shows that Randolph remained in the political arena, but was defined by defeats rather than victories. A rare but revealing detail lies in Randolph's military service during the Second World War. He served with the British Army in the Middle East, North Africa, and Yugoslavia, reaching the rank of major. During his time in Yugoslavia, he was attached to missions liaising with Josip Broz Tito's partisans. His work in this capacity is lesser known compared to his father's wartime leadership, but documents confirm his presence in critical Allied efforts to coordinate resistance movements. This service gave him a legitimate, if overshadowed, contribution to the Allied war effort. The debated point in Randolph's life concerns his character and reputation. Some contemporaries, such as Evelyn Waugh and other society figures, described him as arrogant, domineering, and difficult. Stories of heated arguments and explosive temper were common in accounts from friends and colleagues, yet others, including certain family members, defended him as loyal, witty, and fiercely protective of his father's legacy. Biographers remain divided. Some view Randolph as a man crushed under the weight of expectation, while others see him as his own worst enemy, undone by poor judgment and lack of discipline. Randolph also pursued a career in writing, which proved more enduring than his political ventures. His most ambitious work was a multi-volume biography of his father, begun in the 1960s. He completed the first 2 volumes before his death, and the series was later continued by Sir Martin Gilbert. These early volumes, meticulously researched but written in Randolph's distinctive style, remain significant contributions to Churchill scholarship, though his method of incorporating anecdote and personal observation has drawn both praise and criticism. His personal life was turbulent. Randolph married twice, first to Pamela Digby in 1939. Their son, Winston Churchill, was born in 1940 and would later become a Conservative MP himself. The marriage ended in divorce in 1946, with Pamela later remarrying and eventually becoming Pamela Harriman, a prominent American political figure and US ambassador to France. Randolph's second marriage to June Osborne in 1948 also ended in divorce, though it produced no additional children. Randolph's later years were marked by declining health. He died on 6 June 1968 at the age of 57 at his home in East Bergholt, Suffolk. The cause was a heart attack, the culmination of years of heavy drinking and ill health. His funeral drew significant attention, attended by political figures, family, and members of the press. Randolph's story reflects the heavy weight of inheritance. Unlike his father, he failed to leave a political mark, but did preserve aspects of Churchill's historical legacy through biography. He remains a debated figure, remembered equally for his contributions and his controversies. The narrative then moves to his elder sister, Diana Churchill, whose life contrasts sharply with his temperament and outcome. Diana Churchill, the first child of Winston and Clementine, was born on 11th July 1909. She entered a world of privilege, but also of expectation, arriving at a time when her father's political career was gaining momentum. As the eldest, she was often in the public eye, though she herself rarely sought it. Educated at Notting Hill High School and later at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, Diana demonstrated early promise in both academic and creative settings. Yet her life story would become one of quiet service, family devotion, and private struggle rather than public triumph. The confirmed fact defining her legacy is her wartime service. During the Second World War, Diana worked for public institutions that supported Britain's war effort. She served in roles with the Women's Royal Naval Service, WRNS, and later in clerical and administrative posts linked to the Ministry of Supply. This work placed her within the national mobilisation that touched every level of British society. Official records confirm her role. though it received less publicity compared to her father's leadership or her brother Randolph's military service. A rarely discussed detail is Diana's involvement in charitable and humanitarian causes after the war. In the 1950s, she became active with organizations such as the Samaritans, dedicating time to counseling and support for those in distress. This contribution, though understated, reflects a continuation of Clementine Churchill's own commitment to social welfare. Letters and documents from the Samaritans confirm her participation, but it is a chapter of her life often overshadowed by her family name. The debated point in Diana's story concerns the reasons for her personal struggles and eventual decline. She married twice, first to John Milner Bailey in 1932, an heir to a South African fortune. The marriage was short-lived, ending in divorce in 1935. Later that same year, she married conservative politician Duncan Sandys, with whom she had 3 children, Julian, Celia, and Edwin. This marriage lasted until 1960, when it ended in divorce as well. Some accounts attribute the breakdown to incompatibility and Sandys's demanding political career, while others point to Diana's own health and emotional difficulties. Biographers and family members have offered differing perspectives, but no single explanation has been universally accepted. By the 1960s, Diana faced worsening depression. On 20 October 1963, at the age of 54, she died in London. The official cause was an overdose of barbiturates, ruled as suicide. Her passing shocked the Churchill family and drew public attention at a time when Winston himself was in declining health. It was a private tragedy made public because of the family's prominence. Diana's life illustrates the challenges of living within the Churchill orbit. She was dutiful, committed to service, and engaged in family and social causes. Yet she also endured personal difficulties that ended in premature death. Her story highlights the fragility that could exist behind the facade of privilege. From Diana's path, the narrative shifts to another daughter, Sarah Churchill, whose life unfolded in a more public manner, marked by a career in the performing arts and frequent appearances in the press. Alongside Sarah's story lies the brief but impactful life of her sister Marigold, whose death in childhood shaped the family in lasting ways. Sarah Churchill was born on 7th October 1914, at the height of the First World War. Unlike her older sister Diana, Sarah pursued a career in the public eye, choosing acting, dancing, and later writing as her paths. Her striking presence and talent made her one of the most visible Churchill children during the mid-20th century, though her personal life was turbulent. The confirmed fact that anchors Sarah's life is her career in the performing arts. She trained as a dancer and actress, and by the 1930s, she was appearing on the London stage. During the Second World War, she joined the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, WAAF, serving as a photo interpreter in reconnaissance operations. After the war, she gained international recognition as an actress. She appeared in Hollywood films, most notably alongside Fred Astaire in Royal Wedding, 1951, where she performed song and dance numbers that showcased her versatility. Her acting credits also included British theatre productions and television roles, placing her firmly in the world of post-war entertainment. A rarely noted detail is Sarah's close relationship with her father during certain periods of his life. She often accompanied Winston Churchill on travels and served as his aide-de-camp during wartime conferences. At the 1943 Tehran conference, she was present with her father, assisting in both practical and personal matters. Photographs and diaries confirm her proximity to high-level discussions, though her role was informal. This positioned her uniquely at the intersection of global politics and family life, a perspective rarely afforded to someone from outside the political elite. The debated point in Sarah's biography centers on her personal relationships and struggles with alcohol. She married 3 times, first to Vic Oliver in 1936, a marriage that ended in divorce in 1945. Second, to Anthony Beauchamp, a photographer, in 1949, who died in 1957. And third, to Lord Audley, John Bailey, in 1962, which also ended in divorce. Critics of her lifestyle suggested that her marriages and struggles with alcohol were symptoms of instability. Supporters, however, pointed to her resilience, her artistic independence, and her determination to live outside the strict confines of her family legacy. Biographers disagree on whether she should be remembered primarily for her artistic achievements or for her troubled, private life. Sarah continued to work in the arts well into the later decades of her life, though with diminishing frequency. She wrote her autobiography, Keep on Dancing, 1981, which provided candid reflections on her family, her career, and her battles with personal challenges. She died on 24th September 1982 at the age of 67 in London. Her death closed the chapter on one of the more publicly visible Churchill children, remembered for both glamour and struggle. Parallel to Sarah's story stands the brief life of Marigold Frances Churchill, born on 15th November 1918. She was the 4th child of Winston and Clementine, but her life was tragically short. In August 1921, just before her 3rd birthday, Marigold contracted septicemia following a sudden illness. She died on 23rd August 1921 at Broadstairs, Kent. The loss devastated Clementine, who was encouraged to recuperate in France afterward. Winston's letters during this period reveal his profound grief, though he often buried it beneath public duty. The confirmed fact of Marigold's early death is undisputed, and it left a lasting mark on the family. One rarely noted aspect is that the Churchills did not attend Marigold's burial at Kensal Green Cemetery, as was customary at the time. Debate surrounds the emotional consequence of her loss. Some accounts suggest Clementine never fully recovered from the trauma, while others argue that the arrival of Mary in 1922 brought renewed focus and stability. The contrasting lives of Sarah and Marigold illustrate the extremes within the Churchill family. One daughter lived in the public eye for decades, while another never reached her 3rd birthday, but left a permanent absence in family memory. The narrative then turns to the youngest child, Mary, whose life would become the most stable and enduring of all the siblings, and who carried the Churchill legacy into the 21st century. Mary Churchill, the youngest child of Winston and Clementine, was born on 15th September 1922. Unlike her siblings, she lived into the 21st century, carving out a life that combined public service, authorship, and family stability. Her longevity and achievements made her not only the most enduring of the Churchill children, but also the one who became a principal custodian of her father's legacy. The confirmed fact defining Mary's life is her military and public service during and after the Second World War. She joined the Auxiliary Territorial Service, ATS, in 1941 and rose to the rank of junior commander. During her service, she worked as an aide-de-camp to her father at key wartime conferences, including Yalta in 1945. Records from the British Army confirm her role and presence at such events. Her wartime service distinguished her as a figure of independence within her family, participating directly in national duty rather than living solely in her father's shadow. A rarely noted detail about Mary's career is her later role in public organisations. After the war, she served on numerous boards and charities, including the Royal National Theatre, the Royal Academy of Music, and the National Benevolent Fund for the Aged. She was also involved with the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust, helping to ensure that grants were distributed to individuals committed to public service projects. This quieter but sustained contribution to British civic life set her apart from her siblings, many of whom struggled with personal turmoil. Debate in Mary's biography often surrounds the degree to which she deliberately chose a more conventional and stable path, or whether her temperament simply suited it. Some biographers argue that Clementine, after the loss of Marigold and the difficulties of raising her older children, devoted special attention to Mary, fostering her stability. Others contend that Mary herself consciously avoided the turbulence that marked Randolph, Diana, and Sarah's lives. Either way, her trajectory contrasts sharply with that of her siblings. Mary married conservative politician Christopher Soames in 1947. Together, they had 5 children: Nicholas, Emma, Jeremy, Charlotte, and Rupert. Christopher Soames enjoyed a significant political career, serving as a Member of Parliament, ambassador to France, and later as a European Commissioner. Their marriage lasted until his death in 1987. Unlike her siblings' often troubled unions, Mary's marriage was marked by stability and mutual support, an exception in the Churchill family narrative. Mary also became an author. Her book, Clementine Churchill, The Biography of a Marriage, 1979, received the Whitbread Book Award for biography. She later published Speaking for Themselves, The Personal Letters of Winston and Clementine Churchill, 1998, which provided rare insight into her parents' partnership. These works not only cemented her reputation as a writer, but also helped shape modern understanding of Winston and Clementine's relationship. In 2005, Mary Soames was made a Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire, DBE, for her public service. She remained active in cultural and charitable circles until her later years. She died on 31st May 2014 at the age of 91, the last surviving child of Winston Churchill. Her funeral at Westminster Abbey was attended by senior political figures, family, and representatives of the many organisations she had supported. Today, the Churchill legacy remains closely tied to Mary's contributions. Through her writing, charity, work, and preservation of family archives, she ensured that the memory of both her parents and her siblings would remain part of Britain's historical record. Properties such as Chartwell, now maintained by the National Trust, and institutions like the Churchill Archives Centre at Cambridge, owe much of their depth and accessibility to efforts supported by Mary and her descendants. The contrast between Mary's life and those of her siblings is striking. Where Randolph's ambition ended in disappointment, Diana's life in tragedy, and Sarah's in turbulence, Mary's was marked by stability, achievement, and a long stewardship of the Churchill legacy. Her story provides the final continuity between the wartime Prime Minister and the modern day, bridging history and memory. The story of Winston and Clementine Churchill's 5 children is a study in contrast, shadow, and survival. Born into privilege and extraordinary historical circumstance, each of them faced the immense weight of their father's legacy. The Churchill name carried opportunity but also scrutiny, a burden that shaped their personal lives as much as their public paths. Randolph, the only son, sought to emulate his father in politics and literature, but found himself overshadowed, remembered as much for his defeats as for his contributions. Diana, the eldest daughter, lived a life of duty and service, yet succumbed to depression, leaving her family in grief. Sarah, glamorous and visible, stood beside her father on the world stage and carved her place in film and theatre, but endured turbulence in her marriages and personal life. Marigold, who died before her 3rd birthday, was a reminder of fragility, her absence haunting her parents for decades. And Mary, the youngest, stood apart as the most enduring of them all, steady in her service, devoted in her marriage, and lasting in her preservation of family history. Together, their lives illustrate the cost of being bound to a towering, historical figure. Some lived in rebellion against it, some in service to it, and some in spite of it. None escaped its reach. yet each left a record, whether brief or expansive, that adds human dimension to the myth of Winston Churchill. Today, their legacy survives in archives, memorial trusts, and the work of their descendants. Chartwell remains a symbol of the family's private world, while biographies and foundations continue to revisit their stories. The fate of Winston Churchill's children is not one of simple triumph or collapse, but a reminder that history's greatest figures leave behind families as complex as the eras they helped define.